Internal Revenue Service IRS tax news. Tax time guide. Didn't get economic impact payment? Check eligibility for Recovery Rebate Credit. IR 2021-49, March 2nd, 2021, Washington. The Internal Revenue Service reminds first-time filers and those who usually don't have a federal filing requirement to consider filing a 2020 tax return. They may be eligible to claim the Recovery Rebate Credit. There's a link to the Recovery Rebate Credit here. A new refundable credit authorized by the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Securities, or CARES Act, and the COVID-related Tax Relief Act. So bottom line, the Recovery Rebate Credit, I'm just going to recap it at this point, and then we'll go through this further. The Recovery Rebate Credit is basically the same thing as the economic impact payments, or in other words, the economic impact payments can be thought of as a prepayment of the Recovery Rebate Credits. The Recovery Rebate Credit being tied to the 2020 tax return that will be filed in 2021. Therefore, you can think of the economic impact payments as an estimate. The estimate, therefore, would have to be based on something other than 2020 numbers, typically those being 2019 numbers. And if they didn't have that, at least for the first round, 2018 numbers. And if they didn't have those, especially for filers that don't file, people that don't need to file because they're not required to file, then they may have gone to some other resources, such as the Social Security payments or other government payments, and tried to guess about what the economic impact payment would be and still send it out in those cases. And even if they couldn't reach those people, they also had a tool to for people to let the IRS know that they don't usually file and to send out the economic impact payments. So hopefully the economic impact payments went out to most people. But if you're dealing with someone, or if you are someone, or if you know someone who doesn't normally file a tax return because they're not required to, and they didn't have any other way to get the economic impact payment, they may not have received the economic impact payment. There's many people that probably do still fall into that category. And at this point in time, how do they get the benefit of those two economic impact payments that went out? You got to file the tax return in for 2020 in 2021 to claim the Recovery Rebate Credit. And so that's going to be the thing that's going to remedy any errors in the economic impact payments, or simply the economic impact payments not having gone out. That means that if you haven't received, or you know someone that hasn't received the economic impact payments, they're going to need to file a tax return in order to get the benefit in the form of the Recovery Rebate Credit. Luckily, filing a tax return should be fairly easy, or at least it should be free possibly to do so, because there's free options to file, and you can find some of those free options on the IRS website to use some of the top software to really just be able to file the tax return and hopefully take up the Recovery Rebate Credit if applicable. Now note, there's other kind of areas where people may not quite have gotten the correct economic impact payment. Most people hopefully got the correct economic impact payment and therefore don't have to do much for the Recovery Rebate Credit, or anything for the Recovery Rebate Credit. But for people, for example, if there was an AGI phase out, like your income was higher in 2019 and then you got crushed in 2020, like many people did, and you have a lower income, then you might have had a phase out limit when they sent it out because they based it on 2019 numbers. And then in 2020, it should have been higher because you didn't have that income in 2020. So that might be a situation where you have the Recovery Rebate Credit. There might be a situation where the IRS didn't know about some dependents because possibly they didn't have the tax return, so they sent out just the economic impact payments, didn't know about dependents, and therefore didn't send out the full amount. And therefore, to get the full amount and claim the dependents, then you'd have to file the tax return in 2020. It's possible that many people filed as a dependent in 2019, for example, and then were independent in 2020. One of the most common examples would be a student who was on the tax return of their parent possibly in the prior year, but in 2020 are no longer claimed on a parent's tax return. Then the economic impact payments wouldn't have gone out to that individual or to the parent because they would have been above the age in order to receive it. And therefore, if you filed as not a dependent in 2020, then you may be eligible to have the Recovery Rebate Credit if indeed you are not, someone who's subject to being a dependent. That would be, So those are going to be some of the circumstances. So most individuals eligible for the Recovery Rebate Credit have already received the full amount of 2 rounds of payments known as the economic impact payments. All legally permitted first and second economic payments have been issued. So all the economic impact payments that are going to go out, that are going to be tied to 2020, and therefore something that may need some adjustments if they weren't correct on the 2020 tax returns. Those payments have already gone out at this point. So individuals who were eligible but did not receive the first or second economic impact payments or receive less than the full amounts may be eligible to claim the Recovery Rebate Credit and must file a 2020 federal tax return, even if they do not usually file a return. So the remedy at this point in time, if you didn't get or got the incorrect first or second round or both economic impact payments, is to file the tax return for 2020 in 2021. Again, there are resources to be able to do that for free if your income level is below a certain threshold. The IRS offers free options to prepare and file a tax return. Taxpayers who receive the full amount of both economic impact payments won't claim the Recovery Rebate Credit or include any information about the payments on their 2020 tax return because the IRS already issued the Recovery Rebate Credit in the advance as economic impact payment. So most people should have gotten the full amount of the economic impact payment, and if so, don't have any concerns or shouldn't have to deal with the Recovery Rebate Credit because they already got the full payment. So didn't get an economic impact payment or got less than the full amount? People who didn't get an economic impact payment or got less than the full amount may be eligible to claim the Recovery Rebate Credit and must file a 2020 tax return, even if they don't usually file. The first economic impact payment was based on the individual's 2019 tax year information or 2018 if the 2019 tax return information was not available. So the IRS, for the first one, they said, hey, we're going to base it on 2019 information, even though it's really on 2020, the Recovery Rebate Credit is, but that's what their prepayment is going to be based on. But due to, in part, the fact that there was an extension of the filing deadline for 2019, then if they didn't have it, they would go back to the 2018 numbers and base it on that. So again, if your 2018 numbers were different than 2020 or the 2019 numbers were different than 2020, it could have an impact. What would be the things that would make that different? The AGI limitation and the dependence basically are the two components that could be vary from year to year that might have an impact on the economic impact payments. So the second economic impact payment was based on an individual's 2019 tax year information. The Recovery Rebate Credit is similar, except that the eligibility and the amount are based on 2020 information on the tax return. The Recovery Rebate Credit is reduced by the economic impact payment issued. So the 2020 Recovery Rebate Credit is based on 2020 numbers, obviously, but you could think of the economic impact payments as prepayments of that credit, and of course the IRS didn't have the information to send out the prepayments, therefore they based it on prior year numbers, 2019 or 2018, and again, even if they didn't have that, they tried to go to other resources like Social Security payments and whatnot to send out the economic impact payments. Therefore, if something was different, such as dependence or AGI limitation, for example, on the prior year tax returns on which the IRS based the prepayments to the 2020 tax return, which is the actual Recovery Rebate Credit, then that's when you might have a difference and then need to reconcile that with the help and use of filing the taxes and claiming the Recovery Rebate Credit. So people who were not eligible for either or both of the economic impact payments may still be eligible for the Recovery Rebate Credit since it's based on their 2020 tax return information. Those with lower income in 2020 or who claimed as a dependent on someone else's tax return in 2018 or 2019, but who cannot be claimed as a dependent on someone else's tax return in 2020, may now be eligible for the Recovery Rebate Credit. So those are the common things that might happen that would make people eligible for the Recovery Rebate Credit. So for example, your AGI, your income level was higher in 2019 when they based the economic impact payment, and then you got completely crushed in 2020 like, you know, so many people did. and that means now the Recovery Rebate Credit is going to be based on 2020 numbers, and since your income is now below the threshold, you're not going to have the phase out, and therefore you should get the Recovery Rebate Credit given that information, you would think. Then you also have that dependent information. If you were a dependent in the prior year and you're not, in the current year in 2020, then you might get the Recovery Rebate Credit. If the IRS didn't know about a child that was either born or they sent it for some other reason other than you didn't have a tax return and they didn't know about a dependent, then that might be another issue where there could be a difference between what was received and what should have been received, and that's where the recovery rebate comes in, as well as the filing of the 2020 tax return. People eligible to claim the recovery rebate credit based on their 2020 information must file a 2020 federal return. For more information about the recovery rebate credit, you can see frequently asked questions at irs.gov. There's a link to that here. Filing a 2020 tax return. To avoid refund delays, file a complete and accurate tax return. The best way to file a complete and accurate 2020 tax return is to file electronically. IRS, of course, pushing everyone to try to file electronically. They've been doing this for a long time, but the COVID thing has increased the drive here. So the tax software will ask questions about income, credits, and deductions, and help taxpayers figure the recovery rebate credit. So if you can use software, you would want to use software. The tax returns are getting to the point where they're complex enough that pretty much, I would suggest anybody to basically use the software. You can't do it by hand, but I would do it by hand as a double check possibly, and then use the software, especially given the fact that the software is free at this point in time if your income is below a certain threshold. So the Form 1040 and Form 1040 SR instructions, there's a link to that here, includes a worksheet that can also help. Individuals will need to know the amount of their economic impact payment to claim the recovery rebate credit. Those who don't have their economic impact payment notices can view the amounts of their first and second economic impact payments through their individual online account. So if you don't know what you got for the economic impact payments, you can go to your IRS website, irs.gov, and sign into your individual account. You might have to verify information on the prior year tax return in order to get into the account. Once in, you should then be able to find the economic impact payments that the IRS says were sent out. So for married filing joint individuals, each spouse will need to log into his or her own account. So if you're married filing joint, then you can think about the economic impact payment as, a lump sum that went out to basically like two individuals. But basically, they kind of said that it's going out by an individual by individual basis. Therefore, to check it, each spouse is going to have to log into the IRS website. So the recovery rebate credit will be included in any tax refund. It will not be issued separately. For those due a refund, which would include the recovery rebate credit, combining electronic filing with direct deposit is the safest and fastest way to get their refund. So the recovery rebate credit is part of the 2020 tax return. If there were a refund to it, then it would be included to the refund. If you want the refund as soon as possible, you want to be filing electronically using software to do so and adding the direct deposit on it. So Irs Free File, taxpayers with incomes of $72,000 or less and use brand name software to prepare and file their federal tax return electronically for free with Irs Free File. So there's a link to Free File here. This is basically the IRS having other softwares, third-party softwares that have agreed to have a free file option on them if your income is below a certain threshold. This will then help you to sort that software and then go to their website to take advantage of that free offer if your income is below a certain threshold. So Irs Free File is a great option for people who are only filing a tax return to claim the recovery rebate credit. Free File fillable forms is the only Irs Free File option available for most taxpayers whose adjusted gross income is greater than $72,000. So if your income is greater than $72,000, you could possibly use Free File fillable forms. But I don't really recommend doing that because that's kind of like doing it by hand. And you can do that. You've got all the instructions to do that and whatnot. But especially if your tax return is getting more complex, as it probably will be if your income gets well over $72,000, then you probably either want to purchase the software at that point in time or possibly think about getting advice from an advisor because you want to do two things at that point. One, get the tax return done, and two, have possibly planning and support in the future given the fact that your tax situation is becoming more complex. So taxpayers who have no taxable income but are filing a return to receive the recovery rebate credit should look for several of the Free File products that have no minimum income or eligibility. Simply go to irs.gov/free file, select quote, choose an IRS Free File offer, end quote, and then select quote, browse all offers, end quote, to find a Free File product with a minimum income as part of its offer. So when you look for this Free File software, you also want to consider whether it has a state option in it. You want to consider whether it offers the earned income tax credit. if that's going to be something applicable to you, because some of the refundable credits are going to be a little bit more complex. So what you want to do is go in there and check out the offers. They do have an interview process that might narrow down the software to the ones that fit your need. So if every software fits your need, I might pick the largest software, the biggest brand name, which to me is like TurboTax, because it's owned by Intuit, which is the owner of QuickBooks, and I work with them a lot, but it's a big company. So that's the one I might go. But because it's a big company, they generally have a little bit more stringent requirements, such as a lower income threshold than the $72,000. So some other softwares that aren't as well known to me, there's one called, I think, Tax Slayer, which has a higher, like $72,000 free, and offers a lot of state options and the earned income tax credit. And again, if that one is applicable, then and you have the free option for it, then you might want to pick it in that order. I'd probably pick, the one that's the biggest brand name to me, just because I have some faith in it, that their interview process is good if I qualify, and then if not, then I would probably go to the more ones that are less known to me if I could still get it possibly for free. So free online tax help for military service members, families, and some veterans. So there's also MilTax, and there's a link to that here. Military One Sources Tax Service provides an online software for eligible individuals to electronically file a federal return and up to 3 state returns for free. So the MilTax has that state return option. Note that the other software, the Free File software, also I believe has a bigger, better offer for people in the military. So I think like most of the softwares will then offer free options for people in the military or something like that. You have a bigger threshold to be able to take advantage of these items as well. The free offers for the normal kind of third-party softwares, which should be able to handle the military tax returns. However, they might not be as geared towards the interview process to be picking up the information for military personnel. So you want to make sure that if you're in the military, you're getting help to make sure that you're picking up all the resources that would be available, because there are some added things, and there are resources available to military members to get advice. So you might want to look into that a little bit more before doing the taxes. But then you also have the MilTax here, which again would be geared more directly towards the military tax preparation. I'm not sure if it would be better or worse than just good software like a TurboTax or something like that, but it is geared directly, so it might have a better interview process. So that's MilTax. Military One Source Tax Service provides online software for eligible individuals to electronically file a federal return and up to 3 state tax returns. Then we have the free tax preparation in local communities. First-time filers and those who usually don't have a filing requirement may also qualify for free assistance from the IRS Volunteer Income Tax Assistance, the VITA, and tax counseling for the elderly, the TCE. There's links to those options here. Many people would like to get actual help in person from individuals. They typically have these resources out there, although they're a bit more limited this year due to the social distancing and whatnot. But you can check into this page for this link. So these programs offer free basic tax return preparation to qualified individuals. The VITA program has operated for over 50 years, offering free tax help to people who generally make $57,000 or less, persons with disabilities, and limited English-speaking taxpayers who need assistance in preparing their tax return. So in addition to the VITA, the TCE program offers free tax help, particularly for those who are 60 years of age and older, specializing in questions about pension and retirement-related issues unique to seniors. So if you're in the senior situation, you might want to then go to the one that's going to be specialized more towards seniors, because that's a kind of a specialized area. You're expecting to see different documentation at that age level than you would see at an earlier age level, and it would be helpful if you're working with people that are used to seeing the tax returns in that age level. So this year, some VITA/TCE sites are not operating at full capacity and others are not opening. Check the VITA and the TCE location tool. There's a link to that here to search for nearby available sites. Help at irs.gov. irs.gov has online resources to answer tax questions immediately. The Interactive Tax Assistance is a tool that provides answers to several tax law questions specific to a taxpayer's individual circumstances. Visit irs.gov/filing. There's a link to that here for details about the IRS Free File fillable forms, free VITA or TCE tax preparation sites in the local community, or filing a trusted tax professional. So there's links to those items here. There'll be a link to this in the description.